7:12 a.m. 4 loud, distinct raps. I hadn't even started brewing my morning coffee. The sun hadn't completely risen, and my day had already taken an unwanted turn. Then the phone rang. I hesitated, but picked up. "Your crazy mother won't let us in." Rebecca's voice pierced through the speaker. No salutation, no good morning, just a blunt, high-volume accusation. I didn't say anything. There was no need. Through the upstairs window, I peered discreetly around the edge of the curtain. And there they were. Rebecca, Lucas, and their children. 4 of them, lined up like baggage. Their pajamas were mismatched. Their hair was a tangled mess. And a sippy cup sat on the porch step. 2 massive suitcases and a stack of plastic bags were beside them. There was no car in sight, which could only mean they intended to stay. They hadn't called last night, hadn't given any notice, hadn't even asked, "How are you feeling?" They were well aware I was still recovering. I had made that abundantly clear in 2 separate written notes and 1 voice recording. Yet there they stood, acting as though they were the victims, waiting for the mother, the grandmother, the crazy one, to let them in. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from a rage I hadn't yet learned how to harness. I gripped the banister, steadying my cane. The porch camera showed Rebecca pacing, wildly flailing her arms, gesturing to the kids as if she were a storyteller on a stage. Lucas just stood there, his jaw clenched, his gaze fixed on the ground. I muted the sound. I had seen enough. Downstairs, my kitchen was still peaceful. A folded dish towel rested by the sink. My mug sat empty next to the coffee maker. I had intended to make myself some pancakes, to sit at the small table and read for a full hour without interruptions. Instead, I remained frozen for another moment, listening as Rebecca's voice rose again to someone on speakerphone. She knew we were coming. No, I didn't. But I did know they were here for their own convenience, not for me. Never for me. I filled the kettle with water and set it on the stove. The relentless knocking continued, but they weren't knocks I had to answer. Tomorrow they would likely claim I overreacted, that I should have welcomed them in, that it wasn't a big deal. But today I took my mug and reached for the container of coffee grounds. 3 weeks prior, I had been sitting on this very sofa, wrapped in a blanket, still feeling the lingering effects of the anesthesia. My gallbladder had been removed just 2 days before. They had warned me that recuperation would not be easy at my age of 68. They were right. Every motion caused a twinge. Every breath felt like a tug. I had recorded the voice message in a single careful breath, because even speaking exhausted me back then. "Lucas," I had said, pausing between phrases, "I'm home now. The surgery was a success, but I won't be able to get around much. I'll need at least a full month of true rest. No visitors, no errands, no favors. I just need some room to breathe for a while." He replied 10 minutes later with a text message. "Of course, Mom, take it easy." No inquiries, no offers of help, no genuine concern. Rebecca didn't respond, but the message showed as read. I remember watching the notification pop up. I waited, foolishly, for a follow-up, for some form of acknowledgement. Nothing came. A week later, I sent a second message, much shorter. Just a reminder that I would not be available for assistance this month. Hope the kids are enjoying their time off. That one was completely ignored. I understood the subtle message, and so did my body. I stopped trying to connect. They were fully aware I was incapacitated, aware I was all alone. And now they stood on my front steps as if I had been counting down the days until I could once again cook and clean for 6 people. I glanced out the window one more time. Rebecca was now perched on the top step, holding her phone up as though she were recording a documentary. The children were fidgety. One tugged at Lucas's pants leg. Another lay sprawled across a suitcase. I felt no compassion. I felt like prey, cornered and watched. They weren't stranded.
They were orchestrating a scene. I unlocked my phone, scrolled to the text thread with Lucas, and read it again. Take it easy. So why didn't you? I locked the screen and turned the kettle off just before it reached a boil. The last thing I needed was more noise. Not when I already understood that this was not a simple misunderstanding. It was about utter disregard, about stepping over a boundary and expecting me to pretend it didn't exist. And I had very deliberately drawn that line.
The following morning, I made it permanent. It was Claire who informed me. She hadn't meant to cause any trouble. She was simply out on her nightly stroll, pulling that absurd bright orange leash attached to her yapping terrier. I was tending to the potted fern on my porch, feigning that I still had the stamina for small tasks. She stopped to chat, as she always does, and tilted her head toward me. "Say, I saw your son's home has some new tenants. A young couple. Beach chairs, wine boxes, a real summer vibe. Are they doing the Airbnb thing again?" I froze. "Beach chairs?" I asked. She nodded. "Moved in yesterday afternoon. Big white SUV, Washington plates." "You didn't know?" I shook my head, but managed to smile as if it weren't a piece of news that had just ripped something open inside my chest. I waited for her to walk away before going inside. I set the watering can down, closed the door, and stood in the entryway, staring at the front door, my hand hovering over the deadbolt. They hadn't just arrived unannounced. They hadn't forgotten to make arrangements. They had a plan. This was the plan. Rent out their house for 2 months, pocket the money, and send the kids to me. No babysitter expenses, no grocery bills, no chaos on their own dime. Just offload everything onto me and call it family. They had done it before. Not this brazenly, but often enough. When Rebecca wanted to recharge her energy, I kept the kids for 9 consecutive days. When Lucas attended that convention in Denver, I rescheduled a dentist appointment I had waited 6 months for, just to fill in for him. It wasn't a new practice, but it was always framed as an unavoidable, last-minute emergency. Now I saw it clearly. It was never last minute. It was premeditated. And I had been too exhausted, too dutiful, too afraid of being called difficult to ever call it out for what it was. Not this time. I walked away from the front door and down the hall. The children were still outside, bickering with one another. Rebecca was now sitting with her arms folded, scrolling on her phone as though she was the one being inconvenienced. I opened the drawer in the hallway. I was doing this not for them, but for me. It was a Friday afternoon. I had pushed through a headache and an aching hip just to get myself out the door. The grocery store was packed, and the bags felt heavier than usual, but I had still filled them with the things they liked. Eggs, milk, cereal bars, and fruit snacks shaped like dinosaurs, not bears. Rebecca opened the door, took the bags from my hand without looking up, and went straight to the kitchen. "Next time," she said, sifting through a bag, "get the kind the kids actually eat." That was all. No thank you, no how are you feeling, not even a glance to see if I was standing upright or wincing from the pinched nerve that had been bothering me for days. I sat on the edge of their sofa while the kids ran past me. Not one of them stopped to say hello. Lucas was upstairs on a work call. Rebecca didn't offer me coffee or water. I watched her unpack the groceries in silence, behaving as though I were a faulty delivery service. I left after 15 minutes, telling her I had a follow-up appointment, which was a fabrication. I simply couldn't endure sitting there any longer. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from physical discomfort, but from that whispered comment. They thought I hadn't heard it. Rebecca on the phone, her voice low in the hallway, the door ajar. She should be grateful we even visit. Grateful. As if I hadn't cleaned up every mess they had left for years. As if I hadn't held their babies when they had the flu,
or stocked their freezer when Lucas lost his job, or remained silent when Rebecca's sister crashed in their basement for 6 months rent-free and left the place smelling of mildew and cheap cologne. That word, grateful, sank into my chest like a finishing nail. The following morning, I contacted Ray, the locksmith I had used years ago when my old shed was broken into. He remembered me and asked if everything was all right. I told him, just updating a few things. He came that afternoon, changed every lock, and while he worked, I retrieved the estate binder from the hallway drawer. It still comes back in flashes that night. I was 2 weeks into recovering from pneumonia. My breathing was labored, my ribs still aching, and a wheeze in my chest followed every movement. The doctor had instructed me, no stress, no strenuous activity, no visitors. I had relayed that message, but Rebecca didn't believe in boundaries. Not then, not now. I remember the low murmur of voices first, muffled through the walls, then the sound of high heels on the hardwood floor and laughter, much too loud for a weekday evening. I emerged from my bedroom, wrapped in a blanket, my hair still damp from the humidifier, and walked into my own living room filled with strangers. They were drinking from my glasses. Someone had moved my furniture to make room for a folding table covered in pizza boxes and cheap wine. My orchid had been pushed into a corner, tilted sideways. Rebecca saw me and smiled as if nothing was amiss. "It's just a few friends from work. We'll try to keep it down." I looked at Lucas, who was standing near the fireplace. He saw me, saw the beads of sweat on my forehead, my shallow breathing, but he said nothing, not even a nod of apology. He simply continued to sip his drink and look away. Later that night, after the last person had gone and the dishwasher had clanked shut, I asked him quietly in the kitchen, "Why didn't you say something? Just one sentence." He rubbed the back of his neck as if my question was an inconvenience. The binder had been there for years. A sturdy, black zip-up with tab dividers and laminated sheets. It was something I had put together after Frank passed away, when I realized I didn't want to leave anyone to guess about my wishes. It held everything: the deed, insurance policies, bank statements, my medical directives. I opened it slowly, flipping past the sections I hadn't needed to review in a while. My own handwriting stared back at me, neat and steady. It felt strange to read my own words now that they were obsolete. I found the tab marked Beneficiaries. Lucas's name was still there, written in pen. Rebecca's too, listed as the guardian of the funds for the children. Back then, I thought I was doing the right thing, keeping it all within the family, keeping it simple. I had believed that love, even weary love, meant security. I pulled out the correction tape and began to erase. First Lucas, then Rebecca, and then the clause that gave them access to manage the college fund. I replaced them with my niece, Leora. We weren't particularly close, but she checked in once a month, sent cards, and never asked for anything but my time. I removed Lucas's name from the medical power of attorney and replaced it with my neighbor, Martha, who had driven me to the hospital last February when my coughing wouldn't stop. Then I rewrote the final clause of the will. Just one sentence. "Those who disregard my boundaries shall not be my heirs." No anger, no theatrics, just clarity. I didn't send a text to Lucas, didn't email him, didn't drop any hints. If he noticed, it would be through the absence of access, of power, of entitlement. It felt peaceful when I zipped the binder closed. Not triumphant, just clean. I placed it back in the drawer and locked it, not because I was afraid, but because I was finished explaining the choices I had the right to make. Outside, I could still hear the muffled sound of Rebecca's voice through the porch. Her tone was more aggressive now. She was likely calling someone, trying to construct a narrative where she was the one being wronged. The neighborhood would hear it, and so would I.
Don't create a scene around her. It's just a party. Just a party in a home I had purchased while I was sick and ignored. That was the night I began locking my bedroom door. I told myself it was just for peace of mind, but deep down, I knew something had broken. A layer of safety that I had always provided had been stripped away. That was also the first time I considered what it might be like to remove my name from their emergency contacts, to start reclaiming things that had quietly been signed away without my full consent. I didn't do it then, but the idea took root. Now, years later, it was finally time to act.
The binder sat open on the table beside me. By noon, their performance had turned into a spectacle. Rebecca's voice carried straight down the street. I didn't need to open the blinds to know it. She wanted to be heard. That was the whole point. Your mother is literally unhinged. We're stranded out here with 4 children. She changed the locks without telling us. Each sentence was louder than the last, as if sheer volume could alter the truth. From the living room, I could hear the low shuffle of strollers and sandals as neighbors passed by. They slowed down, of course. They always do when they smell a dispute. A couple of them lingered on the sidewalk. One woman even crossed the street, pretending to check her mailbox just to get a closer look. One of the kids was perched on the top step, tears streaming down her cheeks, her nose running into her sleeve. No one bothered to wipe it. Rebecca was too preoccupied, pacing with her phone pressed to her ear. The middle child had taken a piece of blue chalk and was scribbling something erratic across my walkway. Long, messy streaks that would take hours to scrub off, assuming I ever decided to care again. Maybe I wouldn't. Rebecca called Lucas again, her voice thick with fake outrage. "Tell her we're not going anywhere." As if that could change a thing. I could picture him on the other end of the line, standing in a work hallway somewhere, too ashamed to admit he knew this was bound to happen, too weak to put a stop to it, too accustomed to letting Rebecca take the lead and then apologizing for the aftermath. I didn't open the door. I didn't peek through the curtains. I poured my second cup of coffee, stirred it leisurely, and sat back down in the chair by the window where I couldn't be seen. The volume on my phone was off, but I saw the text come through. It was from Lucas. "What are you doing, Mom? This looks insane." I let the message sit because I wasn't doing anything. That was the point. I opened my notebook and wrote a single line at the top of a fresh page. I warned them. They planned this. They wanted the performance, and I was giving it to them without my participation. The call came just after 9. I was still in the living room, lights dimmed, the coffee long gone. I let it ring twice before answering. "Mom, what in the world are you doing? You're humiliating us." I didn't flinch. "So did you when you lied." He let out a sharp exhale as though he hadn't expected me to say it out loud. "We just needed some help." "No, you needed me to vanish behind the help, to cook, to clean, to babysit for free and in silence." There was a pause. I imagined him rubbing his temple, as he always did when his words didn't have the intended effect. "You're seriously not going to open the door?" I rose and walked to the front hallway. I looked at the deadbolt. I had opened that door too many times before. Opened it to excuses, to late-night drop-offs, to last-minute emergencies that weren't mine to solve. I did that for 40 years. I'm done now. He didn't reply immediately. I could hear muffled sounds in the background. Kids whimpering, Rebecca speaking to someone else. "Mom, you can't just cut us off. This is family." "Then act like it." Another silence, not a shocked one, just the kind where guilt has nowhere to go. "So what happens now?" He asked as if this were a standoff instead of the end of a long-standing pattern. "You go home. You take responsibility for your children. You stop using me as the backup plan you never admit to having." He didn't argue. He didn't agree. He just hung up.
I stood there for another moment, my hand still holding the phone to my ear even after the line went dead. The silence didn't feel cold. It felt honest. I slid the phone into my robe pocket and walked back to the kitchen. I rinsed out my mug and placed it upside down on the drying rack. Then I opened the drawer where my financial documents were kept and pulled out the tuition paperwork. The last thing they assumed I'd always take care of.
The email arrived in the morning. The subject line was cold and factual. Notice of financial reallocation, Maplewood Academy. I didn't even have to open it to know what it was about, but I did, just to make it final. We are writing to confirm that the scholarship previously applied to Colin Thatcher for the upcoming academic year has been withdrawn per the updated account directive received on file. I closed the tab. 2 hours later, my phone lit up. Rebecca. I let it ring almost to the end, then answered. You said you'd cover it, she snapped. No greeting, no attempt at pretending this was anything but transactional. I did, I said calmly, until you turned me into your personal staff. Don't make this about pride. You're punishing the children. No, I'm protecting myself. You should try it sometime. She scoffed, as if she'd just been insulted by someone beneath her. You're being spiteful and you're being exposed. There's a difference. I could hear her pacing, one of the kids crying in the background. Do you know how difficult this makes everything? She said. I do. That's why I didn't want to be a part of it. It's not fair to take it out on them. I almost laughed. And it was fair to rent out your house and dump them on my porch like a summer camp? You didn't ask. You assumed. That's the difference. She didn't answer, not right away. That's the part that always hits people the hardest, the moment you stop defending the silence they expected from you. I waited 3 full seconds, then hung up. Not with a dramatic slam, just a clean click. No follow-up, no let me know if you change your mind. That door had already been closed, locked, and sealed with a deadbolt of their own choices. I stood by the table where the binder still sat. I slid the tuition folder back into its sleeve and zipped it shut. Then I reached for the second envelope, the one with the house deed addendum, the part no one remembered I still had control over. 3 days passed. No calls, no knocks, not even a passive-aggressive text. The silence wasn't depressive. It was clean, like the air after a good rain when everything unnecessary has been washed away. I sat in my armchair by the window, the morning light filtering in through the curtains. 1 cup of coffee rested beside me, strong and black, just how I liked it now that no one was around to wrinkle their nose at the bitterness. Across the room, the binder was still on the table. I'd left it open on purpose, half finished, like a conversation I was finally ready to complete. I reached for the envelope tucked inside the front pocket. Thick paper, sealed. Inside was a deed addendum I had drawn up the day after Lucas hung up. I hadn't told anyone I still had the authority. They had assumed the house had already been passed down. Another thing they believed belonged to them, just because I hadn't taken it off the table yet. I unfolded the paper and read it one more time. Effective immediately, this property is not to be transferred, loaned, or otherwise leveraged in favor of any party who has previously demonstrated disregard for the homeowner's stated boundaries, medical status, or autonomy. Underneath, I had written a line in my own hand, not legally binding, just true. This home is no longer available to those who see me as a service. I placed the envelope inside the binder, zipped it shut, and carried it back to the hallway drawer. When the metal lock clicked, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time, a sense of relief that didn't require anyone's permission. No more faking it, no more performances, no more trading pieces of myself to earn love. The coffee was still warm when I returned to my chair. Outside, a delivery truck drove past. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Ordinary sounds, no drama. I picked up my book and turned to the page I had marked days ago, but hadn't yet found the quiet to finish. This time, I read slowly, and I understood every word.